When you think of doing a more advanced exercise, what do you think of? A lot of times in the fitness industry, what's shown as an advanced version of an exercise ends up being what might be considered even a crazier version of the exercise, whether you're throwing in wobble boards or standing on one leg or whatever. But the reality is, being more advanced with an exercise does not mean by any stretch of the imagination that the exercise has to get crazier. And on today's episode of the Exercise is Health podcast, we are going to explain why. We're going to cue the intro song and then we're going to dive right into this conversation. Welcome to the Exercise is Health podcast, where we're talking about exercise, health, and the interconnectedness of the two. We are your hosts, Charlie
and Julie, and
we will be coming to you every single week from our studio, Muscle Activation Schaumburg. Hey, what's going on, exercisers? This is Charlie. Before we dive into this week's episode, I want to let you know that this Thursday, I'm going to be hosting a training called Exercise for Life Secrets. So if you are looking for the key things, like the top things that you need to be doing in order to consistently and sustainably build your health with exercise, that is exactly what I'm going to be discussing in this Thursday's training. All you have to do to get registered for free is go to secrets.exerciseforlifemethod.com. Now, without further ado, let's dive into this week's episode. Hey, welcome back, exercisers, to the Exercise is Health podcast. We are your hosts, Charlie
and Julie,
and we're coming to you from our studio, Muscle Activation Schaumburg, here in Schaumburg, Illinois, where we believe that your health is your most valuable asset. And the single best thing that you can do to both boost and protect this asset is exercise. Specifically, exercise is geared towards building the health and function of your muscles. Now, so many of you have been faithfully following the Exercise is Health podcast, and so many of you are brand new to the Exercise is Health podcast. But for those of you who have taken the time to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, we want to say thank you. Thank you so much for doing that. I want to take a second right now to highlight one of the recent reviews we received.
So this 5-star review reads, "Love this podcast. It is not just for fitness buffs, but for the regular person wanting to live a lifestyle of being active. Great tips and great perspective for exercise and muscle activation techniques." Thank you so much for that 5-star review. We truly appreciate it. And I love the content of that review because I think so many people have the misconception that exercise is for workout buffs. Exercise is for athletes, but really exercise is for everyone. We just have to continue to explain to you all the different flavors that exercise can come in.
That is so true. And speaking of flavors of exercise, one flavor of exercise is what might be considered an advanced version of exercise or an advanced way of doing specific exercises. And so often in the fitness industry, when it comes to doing an advanced version or learning an advanced version, it often ends up becoming more of a crazier version, more of a circus act, more of a balancing, juggling technique as the quote-unquote advanced version of the exercise. But we have pretty strong opinions on why that should not be the case, and today we're going to tell you about that.
I was just thinking about some of the examples that I saw when I used to work, in a bigger gym, and we don't really get exposed to that anymore, Charlie, because we work by ourselves here at our private studio. But I remember one time walking around the gym with a client and I saw another trainer hanging by her knees on like a pull-up bar and then doing crunches upside down like that and showing her client like, that's what we're going to do now. And I thought, oh my gosh, number one, that is a very advanced move. And number two, that advanced move is quite crazy in that there is a lot of risk that goes along with it. So although there's probably certainly is some benefit to hanging upside down and doing crunches, and probably this client was very accustomed to exercise, but there's also a huge amount of risk that goes along with it. Risk for injury, risk for doing it wrong, risk for one little slip and, you crack your skull. So a lot of times, although it doesn't seem as extreme as this example, there are huge amounts of risks and or loss of benefit in exchange for quote unquote advanced / crazy a cool variation or whatever you want to qualify this as. So it's important that you really consider this because we, again, want you to be getting the biggest bang for your buck, which sometimes means you're doing boring type of exercise. But again, we're not here to be entertained by the gym. We're here to use the gym as a vehicle for our health, for a contributor to our health. And because of that, we have to keep that in mind and use that idea to make sure that we're checking ourselves when we're at the gym, because it's very easy to get involved in these very risky or quote unquote advanced or cool variations of exercises.
Yeah, I love that point of, hey, the whole goal of exercise is to build your health. And that is why we're engaging in exercise, to build the health and function of your body. And so if you look at, okay, well, what is the thing that drives the health changes that we get from exercise? It really comes down to challenging your muscles, getting your muscles to contract more, getting your muscles to contract more frequently, getting your muscles to contract at higher intensities. And why this is important to understand is because if the way you are advancing in exercise is through the coordination component, is through the balancing component, is through, like you're saying, Julie, making it a higher risk if there's an error component, well, that's not the way that you advance the exercise if you want to drive the health changes. Because that doesn't have much to do at all with driving the muscle contraction, with getting your muscles to contract more frequently, more intensely, longer. Like, it really doesn't have anything to do with that. In fact, in most cases, it actually downregulates the muscle contraction because you have so much of this external juggle. Well, actually, it's an internal juggle that appears external, but this juggle that's going on with the exercise that, guess what? Now you can't do as much load. You can't do as much challenge for your muscles. You can't do it for as long because it's considered an advanced exercise, when in fact, that's going to be a less efficient, less effective, and shall we say, less advanced way of actually progressing your health from exercise.
I love that. It becomes less advanced because it takes you away from the main goal of what we're trying to do here, which is progress your muscles' ability to be challenged. So the more directly that we can do that, the more efficient your workout becomes. So these quote unquote advanced types exercises actually become less stimulating, less challenging to the muscles. A really good example of this that you guys are probably really familiar with is, think about a squat. You guys can picture a squat in your head. You're standing on the floor, you squat up and down. And sometimes we think, oh, well, I'm really good at squats. I should, take the next step and stand on a Bosu ball while I do my squats. Well, isn't that going to be more advanced because it's more difficult? So that's a great point. It is more difficult, but not in the way that you want it to be. Meaning it's really hard to stand on that surface, right? You're all wobbly. You're going to feel your feet and ankles probably working like heck to keep you stable. And because of that lack of stability on the ground, quote unquote, the more advanced, because there's less stability, actually takes away from your ability to challenge your legs and glutes, which is what you were doing the squats for in the first place. So you added the challenge in terms of your balance or staying on this device, and you took away your ability to challenge your glutes. Sometimes this little step into being more advanced doesn't even look this dramatic. We can even scale it back. I oftentimes will have clients doing squats or maybe like a single leg squat, and they feel really wobbly or unstable. And the whole goal of when we exercise for health is to stimulate and challenge muscle tissue. So the more that we have to think about balancing, the more that it's going to take away from the ability to directly challenge this muscle tissue. So instead of going from a Bosu ball back to a flat surface, sometimes that means you're going from a flat surface holding on to nothing to now a flat surface holding on to something. And so taking away the quote unquote advanced piece that sometimes we add in terms of like balance or something like that actually takes away from the efficiency and the true advancement of an exercise.
So when it comes to doing things that are more advanced, I guess we should really identify what we even mean by advanced or advancing, right? Because I think one of the big confusion points is that when the mainstream fitness industry puts out an advanced version, it is more difficult, but it's difficult in a different way. Meaning, it's not more difficult as in it's a greater challenge for your muscles. It's more difficult in that it's something now new for your brain to figure out. And so that's an advancement, but not in the direction the exercise was necessarily going before. If you're doing the exercise to improve your health, that means you're doing the exercise to challenge your muscles. And now if you add this balance component, that's an advancement, but not in the direction of challenging your muscles, okay? So what does advancement actually look like? Well, I remember in high school, I was in the class called Advanced German. Well, what does that mean? That means for the first 2 years of high school, I became proficient enough at the lower levels of German that I had enough of a grasp on those to then move into the advanced class. So I didn't need to worry about, like the basic words or basic sentence structure or whatever. I already had that down, and then I could build upon it. I remember, 5 years ago, Julie and I would go to dance class on Wednesday evenings, and we'd go to the beginner's class, and then there would always be an advanced class. And Julie was more than proficient enough to go into the advanced class. I was not. Why? Because I didn't have those basics down that we learned in the beginner's class that then I could build upon in the advanced class and do the additional moves. Julie was more than able to do that. I wasn't. So when we're talking about it from exercise, a lot of times what ends up getting thrown out is like, okay, well, you have a certain amount of strength here. Now we're going to advance you with this kind of coordination piece. And it's like, well, that's an advancement, but in a different way. If we're talking about using exercise to build our health, then the focus really needs to come back to how is this challenging our muscles more, getting our muscles challenged more frequently, more intensely for a longer duration. And so how is it doing that? Because that's the thing that's going to drive the health changes.
Charlie, I love that analogy you brought with learning a language because it's so true. It's like when we're building our bodies to be able to consistently challenge our muscles, which, by the way, that is a skill you have to develop. There's like the beginner steps. We always think we can jump in and go to the advanced stuff, but is learning how am I going to build this skill so that I can safely and effectively challenge my muscle tissue. And the advanced version of doing this is not going to look crazier. It's actually probably going to look more focused. And the advanced version, I would say, is getting really proficient at those checks. Like, hey, I sit on my leg press and what do I do so I know this is going to feel good? How do I make my adjustments more quickly? Because I don't know about you, but I've noticed that the more that I work with a client on learning these checks, day one, it takes 5 minutes just to get situated on a machine so that we can talk about all the little checks and tweaks that we need to be looking out for, to teach them what to think about when they're feeling their body, to teach them to identify natural communication from their body, how to listen to that. And then as they become more advanced, they know what to look for. And then it's literally, we get on the machine and go. That's advanced. That is being in tune with your body, ready to progress and ready to challenge the muscle tissue in a safe manner.
Yeah, I love that point. And to build on it, I think another form of advanced in our eyes is not just understanding like what to do, but also understanding what to feel with your exercise. Okay. A lot of times when we do an exercise, we may just kind of feel this general area of fatigue, but being able to kind of lock in or make that mind muscle connection quicker and really feel the sensation in the areas of your body that you're intending to, and being able to do that repeatedly and being almost have that be your default as opposed to, so like we talk about this idea of prioritizing contraction over motion, like have that become so ingrained that that's the default way that you exercise. That's the default way that you do your resistance training as opposed to trying to move the weight. Really zero in on that contraction and then just kind of groove that out. Now that becomes an advancement where you get to lean deeper and deeper into that mind muscle connection and really focus on that squeeze. And once that can become your default, then you can start to play with like your tempo or how fast you're moving and still make sure that you are leading with a contraction, still make sure that you are sensing that squeeze the entire time. And then that may be a form of advancement because it's still along the same lines of keeping the focus on the muscle contraction, keeping the focus on the muscle squeeze. But we get to add other things in that may make it more challenging to do that at earlier stages if you're not already proficient at connecting with your body and feeling the squeeze.
That ability to know what to feel and how to feel your body and like deciphering those cues is so advanced. And to build on that, Charlie, another thing that I think is kind of implied when you say that, but I think it is important enough that we should talk about it, but is making the appropriate adjustments in response to those cues. I think sometimes when new people listen to our podcast, they think like we're being like super picky and they're like, wow, I mean, if I went through a workout and I like nitpicked all those little cues, you know, the workout would take me forever. I couldn't tune out and tune in just to my music. Like, what's going on here? But another sign of being advanced is to be able to make those adjustments quick. A few podcasts ago, we took, 20 minutes and broke down how I made a handful of adjustments to a push-up for a client. And externally, it might have looked like a push-up to you and me, but all the hows, all the setups, all the starting ending positions that we tweaked during her push-up set really made it customized to her body. And I'm her trainer, so she pays me to be the advanced eyes and the advanced kind of feeler of her workouts. But being able to sense your body, sense the cues, and adjust quickly and efficiently, I think is a huge sign of being advanced, because that, again, is how you're going to be able to return and repeat to challenging and stimulating your muscles, because we have to really get away from these advanced, tough workouts that leave us basically posted up on our couch for the next 4 days or rolling on a foam roller for the next week and a half, because we have to recover so intensely from that intensity. So we have to lose that and remember, hey, advanced is being super in tune with your body, finding ways that we can continually increase the challenge and stimulation on our muscles, which doesn't really look externally more advanced. It probably looks like you're way more in tune, way more focused, way more focused and thinking about your body, the movement, analyzing each thing and making those quick adjustments, because you only get better at it, but you do have to practice it.
Now, if you've read our book, The Exercise for Life Method, you're probably recognizing that a lot of what we're talking about is along the lines of measuring, detecting, and tracking your internal progression. Because a lot of times when it comes to making an exercise more advanced, it's advanced from what it looks like on the outside. And we like to say, oh, well, this is a higher coordination task, or, it's involving different areas of your brain or whatever. And that's why it's more advanced. But really what it comes down to, again, when it comes to progressing your health, it comes down to progressing your muscles, challenging your muscles. And so actually in our book, The Exercise for Life Method, we talk about this in terms of progressing things internally as opposed to just trying to progress things externally. A lot of times when we're trying to advance the exercises, the easy way that we think of advancing them ends up being from an external progression. But the problem is external progression does not necessarily lead to internal progression and internal health benefits. But everything that we've talked about today are ways to kind of check in and note internal progression. We go more in depth in this in our book, The Exercise for Life Method, so you can definitely pick up a copy if you would like to learn more about that. I actually go pretty in deep with it, really in deep with this, to be honest, in Exercise for Life University. Really what we're talking about here is how to progress things or how to advance things internally, make that internal progress. And that's a really big piece of making sure that you're continuing to build your health with exercise. So who do you know that needs to hear this episode? Who do you know that is a little bit hesitant to try some more of the advanced moves in the gym because they are seen as crazy moves in the gym? Share this episode with them so they can learn why doing things that are more advanced for your body does not mean it has to be crazy for your body. And while you're online, head on over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a rating and review. It helps people find this podcast when they're looking for information on exercise and when they're looking for information on health. So if you found value in this conversation today, let us know by leaving us that 5-star rating and review. Well, thanks so much for tuning in. We always appreciate it. Have a fantastic week, and we'll talk with you all next week. So what'd you think about that episode? Did you find the information useful? If you enjoyed what we discussed today, then you are going to love the Exercise for Life Secrets training, which you can get registered for free by going to secrets.exerciseforlifemethod.com. It's going on this Thursday and space is limited. So head there now, secrets.exerciseforlifemethod.com to get signed up. This podcast is for information purposes only. The statements and views on this podcast are not medical advice. This podcast, including Julie and Charlie Cates, disclaim responsibility for any possible adverse effects from the use of information contained herein. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about guest qualifications or credibility. This podcast may contain paid endorsements or advertisements for products or services. Individuals on this podcast may have a direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to herein. If you think you have a medical issue, consult a licensed physician.